You are watching Reed's Conversations, a podcast series on writing, filmmaking, acting, and theater. For today's episode, I'll have a conversation with director, screenwriter, and actor Greg St. Pierre. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Reed's Conversations, the podcast series on writing, filmmaking, acting, and theater. Today, I'm very excited to have a special guest with me. This is a friend of mine. His name is Greg St. Pierre. He is a film director, screenwriter, and actor, and overall great guy. So I'm so happy to have him on my show. So, Greg, how you doing today?
Good day, Reed. How the heck are you, mate?
I'm doing all right, mate. How's it over there? And what part are you over there right now?
Hey, man. I'm just happy to be speaking to you again. I know it's been a while, and we saw each other in person. How long ago was that? 3, 4 years ago?
Yeah, in Florida at the was it the Fish Lips restaurant, seafood restaurant or something?
Uh, yeah, I think that is where we met. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was special because I was on my vacation at Walt Disney World and with my then wife at the time, and thankfully we just happened to be in the area, just to have dinner and just be near the ocean front. So that was special. So yeah, that's when we saw each other. I think it was in 2021, I want to say.
Yep. And I think we spoke for online for probably what, a decade before that?
Yeah. Well, I think a decade, yeah, because we met each other through Terry Razio's website, wordplayer.com, and just corresponded over the years. And since we were both writers, we would show each other's work, and I always
Yep.
appreciated the great feedback you gave me for my stuff, and hopefully vice versa. So yeah, then it was nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it was nice just being able to see each other in person. So that's definitely a treat for sure.
For sure.
But yeah, let's go ahead and for those who don't know you that well, let's talk a little bit about yourself. Because you've lived in Florida for most of your life, but you're originally from Salem, Massachusetts. You were born there, is that correct?
That's correct. Although I moved to New Hampshire, I think when I was 3, and to the extent that I have grown up, I grew up there. And after that, it was Florida and now South Carolina.
Wow. And then you were briefly in Texas too, like for a brief period.
Briefly in Texas, yeah. And my wife and I decided Texas wasn't for us. So, it
Yeah.
wasn't without its good points. The barbecue was amazing, but it's bloody hot and bloody cold in the winter. So now it's a little less hot and a little less cold here in South Carolina.
Oh, I can imagine. So it's South Carolina, not North Carolina?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry about that.
That's
Um,
okay.
Yeah, and also that's cool though that you've been able to live in different places and got to experience different climates. So that's really cool. But also when you were young, what were your favorite movies and books or just stories that you enjoyed that really that inspired you to want to do like filmmaking and writing? What are the ones that you remember more vividly?
Um, to be honest, when I was a kid, it never occurred to me to be a filmmaker. But I loved movies. I loved great stories. I think probably the most inspiring story for me was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I saw that in the movie theater when I was 10 or 12 years old, and it just fired my imagination. I mean, even before that, I enjoyed science fiction stories and things like that. But I mean, that movie just blew me away, and it still does at this point. I think Steven Spielberg is e easily one of the best directors that's ever walked on the planet, bar none, you know. Um, and I didn't really think about getting into filmmaking until I tried acting. I think that was probably 2002 or something like that when I played a police officer in a local small budget film and held a script in my hands for the first time and thought to myself, I think I can do that.
And what
So
was that short film that you did? Do you remember the title of it?
yeah, that was called He's Dead, and I played a police officer.
Awesome. But you weren't, but your character wasn't the one that was dead though. It was just a different character.
Yeah, no, I was kind of a side character. I wasn't super important.
No, I always say there's no there's no small roles, only small actors, but you're definitely a great big actor because you also have done some uh like for some of your concept trailers, you would do like the voices of it too. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of voiceover here and there.
That's so cool. And I also, I think I read on your IMDb, you also did, were you a DJ at some point for a radio station? I'm trying to remember the name of it. Uh,
Um, so on WMEL in Melbourne, Florida, I had my own radio show doing, my trade at the time was automotive technician, and the owner of the radio station happened to be a customer at the shop I worked, and great guy. And I jokingly said to him one day, "Hey, when are you going to give me my own show?" And he said, "Put together some ideas and we'll talk about it." I almost fell off my chair. I was really only kidding, but I did put together kind of a synopsis of a radio show, and he said, "Let's do it." And so every Saturday at 5 or 6 o'clock, I was on for an hour and was shockingly successful. Was a call-in show. People could call and ask questions, and I knew my subject matter, so that part was easy, but it was a little nerve-wracking at first. I couldn't believe what I was doing. I think I did that for about 8 months or so.
wow, that Matt, that's so cool. So, man, I did not know that. That's so awesome, Greg. Because
It
you're
was fun.
because you're definitely a car guy too. I know that on your Facebook page you have a lot of, great information about automotives and stuff like that. So that's cool that you for 8 months. That's so cool that you had that show just talking about cars and answering questions. That's really cool.
Yeah, and the only reason I didn't continue is because we had hurricane damage to our house, and as luck would have it, we had a lot of repairs to do, and it was hard to justify the time it took to go do that while my wife was, working on the house. So
Gotcha.
kind of had to put an end to it, but it
That's
was fun.
that's understandable though, but that's, still cool that you got to do it. How many people can say they've had their own radio show? So that's pretty still pretty cool. My goodness. And then also trying to think when for acting, even though you acted in that short film, when you were in like high school or anything like that, so you didn't do any like high school productions or anything like that. It was just kind of like just that short film at the time for just acting.
I actually directed a really short film when I was in middle school, I think, called Stupidity. And it probably was the most pointless thing I've ever done, but I was a little kid. I had no concept of story or anything like that. So yeah, I guess I kind of lied. I mean, but it was a school project. It wasn't something we did because I was interested in it. It was something the school asked us to do. So a bunch of us put together little films. It was Super 8. Um, and did a couple interesting things in it. I something of a stunt in it. Now, I was a little kid. I was probably 11 or 12 years old, but I got run over by my mother's car, and all the kids wanted to know how the heck I did that. And that part was fun.
Oh man. And what did you do to achieve that stunt?
Clever editing.
Yeah, because
Um, it was done for comic effect. So I tripped and fell behind my mother's car, and then I cut to her. Now, at that time, cars had column shifts, so throw it in reverse, back up, and you see the car kind of go over a bump, and then she stops and gets out, and I get up, and I've got tire tracks across my back. The kids thought that was hysterical, and I kind of stumbled off into the distance, but there was no other point to it whatsoever. It's kind of embarrassing in hindsight, but it was a neat little visual trick, I guess, for the time.
yeah, and I think that happens too when we're young, because we're just still learning about stories, but at the time it's like, oh, isn't it cool if we just do that? Uh,
Right.
but it sounds like just the technique you did for the editing, that's actually pretty smart, especially at a young age. Because if you think about it, because they don't know how it's achieved, and I think that's one of the magic of editing is just put like a little log in the back and they think it's, like, oh my gosh, you ran over your son or something like that.
I've got that on CD now or DVD now, so I guess at some point I'll cut that out and send it to you. But
Yeah.
that's all I'm sending you. The rest of it's really bad.
Oh, that's cool. And yeah, and then also let's go ahead and talk about some of your other films you've made. Um,
Sure.
so after you did that short film, He's Dead, when did you want to start directing? Because you've directed what, three short films
Correct.
that you both wrote, directed, and produced. So let's talk about your first short film, and I believe it's called Pizza, a Cops Parody or something like that.
Just pizza, but it is a Cops parody. Yes.
Gotcha. And can you talk about the origins of that project, how it came to be, and then the writing of the script, and then also just the physical production of how you were able to, like do the scheduling with the actors, finding the locations, and also if there was any special effects involved, like say, and also then the editing process, and then afterwards, because I believe it won quite a few awards, didn't it? So can you talk about the process of that short film from its inception to the actual making, and then also, and of course, afterwards, how how everything turned out at the end?
Sure. So initially, after I kind of got the film bug in me from having done acting for that local guy, um, some friends and I thought we would start a film group and see if we could do our own films. And so I met a couple guys on Craigslist that had a mutual interest in it. We started our own film group and started batting ideas around. Now, at this point, I literally had virtually no experience with this, so it was all pretty new to me. But I had a sense that I could probably do comedy because I grew up in the realm of Airplane and Naked Gun and all that kind of sort of abstract humor. And so we thought we'd put my comic chops to the test. And so we were putting ideas out there. And one of them was by my buddy Phil Lister, who was cameraman on that project, said, what about Cops parody? So it would be like pizza filmed in the style of the Cops TV show. And as soon as he said that, I started laughing and I could see the whole thing in my head. And I knew exactly what it was going to look like. And it was, I started writing it. I think I wrote it in a couple weeks. I had written it in a couple weeks. Um, I bought an early version of Final Draft software to write it on, which again, I'd never written a screenplay before. So that was a learning experience in itself. Got the script written, made a couple tweaks here and there. Um, and by that point, other people had joined the project, and so we thought, okay, now I guess the next question is how the heck are we going to do this? So we started location scouting and found a couple different spots. We needed something like a that we could turn into a briefing room for the opening scene that would pass as a briefing room, I guess. And so I think that was the first location that we found. In the meantime, I had some people that had joined the group. We're going to start working on we had to come up with the shoulder emblems. Um, Sorry, I think my phone is. Can you still see me?
Yep, sure can. Yep, sure can.
Okay, my phone went black, so I wasn't sure if you could still see me.
Uh,
Um, so some of the people volunteered to work on the uniforms that they were sort of copish. We had to develop a little patch that looked kind of copish, but if you look close, it's a pizza emblem. So we started building the things that looked like cops, but weren't cops, and that part was fun. The girls that did the uniforms put a lot of work into that. That was pretty cool. Uh, Also, we had a scene where I was going to have to spray a guy in the face with pepperoni spray rather than pepper spray. So I had to figure out how to do that. Um, I found on eBay these bottles of Evian misters, water misters, or mineral water or something. And I said, okay, it's a mister though, but how am I gonna uh, make this thing spray a stream? So I took a small drill bit and drilled out the tip of that. And I bought a couple of them because I knew I was probably going to mess up the first one and we might need extras. So experimented on the first one and got, a bit of a drill bit in there and drilled a hole. So I was able to get a pretty good stream out of that. I knew we wouldn't have a ton of shots at it. So we weren't going to be able to do too many takes, but I knew it was going to work. And then Phil Lister, the same gentleman I was just telling you about who was going to film the project, he designed the label for it. So we painted the bottle and put pepperoni spray on it. Phil did a great job in that. And also we had a scene. So this is just talking about props that we were going to need. Um, we had a scene with what the heck do we call it? Flashbang Cola,
okay.
which every time I read that in the script, it made me laugh, and I'm the guy who wrote it, so I guess it was good. Um, so he designed labels for the soda bottles that said Flashbang Cola on them, which was remarkable. So this is the process of getting the props ready for, for shooting. And while all that was going on, we found a couple other locations. Some of these were houses of cast members, things like that. So it wasn't too hard to find good locations. Um, what else did we do? We had to schedule it. We started doing auditions, and the first guy that walked in to audition as the main character was Bobby DeSantis, sorry. And as soon as he started reading the lines, he sounded like a cop, and I knew that he was going to be the main character, and he just carried the whole thing. I couldn't have asked for somebody to do a better job than Bobby did. He just read everything so flat and monotone like a cop would. You know, how they maintain their calm about 99% of the time in their conversations. And that's exactly what I wanted, because if he tried to be corny about it, it wasn't going to work. So, so we started getting at him and a couple other people cast, which I was excited about all of them. I thought they were really going to add a great element to it and authenticity. We decided to shoot it kind of handheld running camera style like they do because it is a documentary when you watch cops.
Mhm.
Um, and then we scheduled it and then we went out there and started shooting it, man. It was almost all night shooting, which was interesting. And I think it was all night shooting actually. I don't think we shot anything in the daytime at all. Um, what else would you like to know about it?
Well, that's actually pretty awesome. I mean, that's a nice little snapshot of like what does it take to make a film? Because especially if you shoot in the dark, I know that must have been difficult trying to get enough lighting, but not having it. So was there any particular lighting systems you used that night? Like, did you use like the like those type of like how you would do like a photo shoot, or was it just simply, hey, we're gonna put this light here so that way we capture the
It
naturalistic?
was because the action was a little bit erratic. It would have been very hard, I think, to have lighting just sort of affixed any place because then everything would have looked a little too pre-planned. And with a documentary style, you know, there's a lot of camera movements and everything. So we just use the lights on the camera, and I think they do that pretty much on the Cops TV show too. Excuse me. So um, the only place I think we had sort of indoor lighting where we didn't have to worry about camera lighting was the opening scene, which was a briefing scene that was indoors.
Yeah.
And I might add that we shot that in a youth center who was nice enough to let us alter it to look like a briefing room.
Really?
So yeah,
That's so cool. I was curious about that because I was like, did they actually? First, I thought you actually went to a police headquarters to shoot it because you know it's nice because it looks like it's excuse me myself. Um, it was nice because in the short film itself, the briefing room that you're talking about. First, I was trying to figure out from a location standpoint. I thought, okay, was this shot in actual police headquarters or was this shot at an actual pizzeria locally in town? So that's just a youth center that you were
that's
able to
it.
use.
And actually, we had to use it. I don't remember how long afterwards, but we had to do a pickup shot because I try to make sure that all my actors get at least some face time where it's close enough they can be identified. Say, hey, there I am, you know. And my wife and the lady next to her, Athena Franson, um, Athela Franson, sorry, it's been a while, never got any kind of close up. So we actually, if you go back and watch it, you'll see a reaction shot from those two, which was shot on a completely different night, and it is absolutely seamless. You can't tell. And
Really?
yeah, because we were watching kind of the cuts from it later, and I said, we never got a shot of those two, so we had to go back and fix it.
Wow. But that's so cool that you went back and did that because I know for other people it's like, tough up. But no, that's so cool that you were generous enough to be like, hey, let's include them too. So that's really generous that you did that.
I thought so.
Yeah, I'm sure they appreciate it too, getting that screen time. My gosh. So wow. So of course, so yeah, so the project's being made, you're in the production of it. So after when you got all your shots done, uh was it you or was there someone else that did the physical editing? And was there like I know sometimes with films you have to balance out like sound, like anything in the background. So was that cool to learn, just the final editing process from the first opening credit to just making sure everything looked right from so how was that process for post?
So yeah, so it was Phil Lister that did the editing on it. I didn't have any of that equipment whatsoever, and he was more than happy to do it. He absolutely loves editing, and I was happy to give it to him. I think I went there for some of it, but I wasn't able to be there for all of it. So he would periodically send me bits of it to show me what it looked like, and get my yay or nay on it or whatever. But Yeah, Phil is a great guy. He does a great job, and I know I've learned a lot of stuff from him since then. So. Um, did that cover all your questions on that?
Yeah, but also I'm still amazed that and so Phil Lister was also the person that came up with the soda labels.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, how many people know how to do that? Right? Like,
Uh,
I can
and the hard part of it is that you only get to see him on screen for such a very brief time. And I know how that's true of so many props and things in all the film industry where somebody could put dozens or hundreds of hours of work into something that, appears on screen for an instant and it's gone. You
imagine.
know, I'm sure they struggle with that a little bit sometime, but at least their work made it on screen. Sometimes it doesn't. So.
Right, exactly. So I'm sure, do you have any of those props like st in storage, like any of those pieces from pizza or anything like that? What was it, the smash? What was the name of the soda again? The smash and
I, I yeah, I don't have any of the sodas. It was Flashbang Cola. I do still have the pepperoni spray bottle. I had to keep that for myself, and I think I've got one of the t-shirts with the pizza emblem on the side. So,
oh,
yeah.
that's so cool. Wow. And also, so once you finished the final edit, so how did you get it entered in a lot of the local film festivals? Who helped you with that? And how did you know which festivals to enter the short film in?
Some of the people in our group already knew about the festival, and that the people that ran that festival also did films. So basically, just went to the website and entered the film. I never entered it. That the only film festival I entered it in was Melbourne Independent Filmmakers Festival. I never entered that in any other. I probably should have, but this was all new to me, and it was a little bit overwhelming at the time, I guess, just because I was still learning everything. And it got accepted, and then when it got nominated for Best Comedy, I just about fell over. I had no idea what I was doing, and most of us were really new at this, so. Um, and then shortly after that, we did the festival, which we got to dress up for and everything. It was a lot of fun. And then, of course, whenever they cut. Now, I got to watch this film in a theater of about 300 people, which was a little bit nerve-wracking, I must say.
Yeah.
Um, so through the roster of films throughout the day, and my film's getting closer and closer to airing, I'm getting lower and lower in my seat because, the film was funny to us, but I didn't know if anyone else was going to like it. Well, when it finally came up and the opening graphic started, the audience started laughing at the opening graphic and then laughed pretty much through the final credits. I mean, I was shocked that everybody loved it, but I was also very pleasantly surprised. That's probably one of the best moments of my life, I think. And at the end of it, when they do the awards thing and they said Pizza won Best Comedy, I couldn't have been more surprised.
Wow, that's amazing. Seriously, that's so cool, man. And because having recently produced a work myself, it is nerve-wracking if you're showing something to an audience. It's like,
Hmm.
wow, so I can definitely sympathize your feeling of like, okay, are they going to get the jokes? Am I not going to bore them? So I could relate, but that's so awesome that it won an award. And I mean, 300 people, that is a lot of people. So that's awesome, Greg. That's so cool.
And I have to tell you that, and I love telling this story too, because again, it is kind of an icing on the cake at the end of an already really amazing night. Um, a couple filmmakers who were writing for the Adult Swim network at the time had entered a film, and they had come down from, I forget where their network is. I think it's South Carolina or North, not, no, it might be Pennsylvania. I forget. I think it's further north than here, but um, so they were there in the audience, and my film beat their comedy. And
Whoa.
afterwards, a bunch of us. Now, one of the guys that was in my film, he owned a bar at the time, so all of us filmmakers went to the bar after the film festival, and those two guys came up to me and said, "We just want to tell you, we thought your film was hilarious. You deserve to win, and we'd like to buy you a drink." I'm like, "What
Wow.
is this happened?" So those
Wow.
guys are professional writers, and somehow we beat them. And their thing was funny. So amazing.
Man, and Adult Swim, because I know Adult Swim was on a Cartoon Network at the time. I is that the same?
Correct.
Yeah, oh my God, that's incredible. I think that's the highest compliment you can get for it's like someone in the industry who who got you a drink because you did a better short film than they did. So that's so
I,
awesome.
I think their quality was better, but I think ours was just flat out funnier. You know,
Yeah,
they
content.
probably had a more money to spend, but I think ours was just very good natured and fun. I don't know how else to describe it. So
Yeah, because sometimes I think it's true. You could have millions of dollars worth of something, but if the content is not as good, it doesn't matter how much money you throw into the project if so I think that's what's great that you had a real cool idea, that I guess as Terry Rossio would describe in wordplayer.com as the strange attractor, where we knew about Cops, of course, the now defunct reality show, but it's cool that you never think about with pizza people because who knows what kind of all the stories that pizza people, delivery people have. So I think just the idea and also the work you did with it succeeded, evidently. So that's so cool. Really awesome.
we also shot a documentary about our film at the time, and I it's on DVD right now, and I no longer have a DVD player, so I don't have access to it. I'm gonna have to get that and rip it so that you can check it out. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not, but it was done by one of the actors in the film, and his thing is just as funny as mine was, I think. So
Yeah, I actually have watched it. I remember.
have you? Okay.
Yeah, so I think you did send me a copy of it a couple of years ago, actually. So I have
Okay.
watched it. I loved it because I love watching behind the scenes documentaries. So I have definitely
Me too.
watched it, but I'm willing to watch it again. So if you want to rip it again, that'd be cool. And wow,
Really?
so after the success with Pizza, did you immediately go into your next short film, or did you kind of just work on, other stuff? And so how, because your next film is another comedy and is called Save the Mosquitoes, I believe, and I've watched it quite a few times. It's hilarious. So
Another mockumentary, yeah.
yeah.
No, I think we did pizza in 2012. I didn't start writing Save the Mosquitoes until 2016, and in that period of time, I helped with a lot of other people's projects. Didn't really have anything in mind that I wanted to do. Uh, Everybody had kind of gone off to do other things at that point, and then we decided we needed to do something else. So, yeah, started writing Save the Mosquitoes, and it was probably just as absurd as pizza. Again, a lot of abstract humor, but it was funny.
Yeah, and for those who haven't heard of Save the Mosquitoes, definitely talk about the premise of the story and how did the idea come about for that particular short film.
All right. Well, I'd love to tell you that it was my concept, but it wasn't. Once again, it was at the film group batting ideas around, and somebody shouted out a couple different ideas, and Save the Mosquitoes was kind of a jokingly put out there, and I said I can work with that, and just began thinking about the concept, and what if activists wanted to try to save something that in reality nobody likes, and it was a fun concept to play with, so I started writing it, and I think it was 13, 14 pages, something like that. And I knew it was going to be a little bit more absurd than pizza and a little bit larger in scope, which I wanted to have more actors and spend a little bit more money and do things in a little bit more epic fashion than pizza, where we played it a little bit safe with locations and daylight. We didn't do much daylight shooting for pizza. I knew this was all going to be in daylight, so I knew it was going to present some new challenges, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with this next project.
Oh, that's awesome because I think for the crowd of people, because in the short film itself, you've had scenes where you have like a good what was it like 20 or 30 people or something like that. So
Something
much
like
larger.
that. Yeah. So I had told them to create protest signs all in favor of mosquitoes. I said, I don't put whatever you want on there, but I want them all to look homemade and it's no profanity or anything like that, but I wanted it to be the end result was what I was looking for. Everything looks like handmade signs people made at home because they did. And I didn't see any of those signs until we showed up to shoot that day. And everybody couldn't wait to show me the signs that they had done. And I was hysterical. Um, so that was part of the process of getting it shot.
That's that's so cool. So that's awesome that you gave creative license for the extras in this case. Because sometimes, sometimes everything's very specific. Like I want it this way. But that's cool that you just gave some basic guidelines. And so I do remember seeing those signs. So I was curious if you had purposely went through each sign and did them yourself. So that's awesome. You let people have that chance to do something of their own and show it to you.
I wouldn't have had the time or patience to make all those signs myself. So
And also, I think in the film, you actually have a cameo because there's a scene, again, for spoilers who haven't seen the short film. There's a moment in the documentary where documentary crew members are capturing the crowd of people trying to stop this. What is it like uh,
it's a mosquito sprayer.
yeah, like the big mosquito sprayer on a back of a truck.
Yep.
And of course, they do the human speed bump, trying to just fly flat on the ground. And you were the driver. You're the driver of that spray truck.
Yeah, there was a couple reasons behind that. For one thing, if anybody was going to accidentally run it over an extra, I wanted it to be me instead of somebody else. But it was my truck, so
Oh,
um, yeah, I was a little nervous about the truck being in proximity to the extras on the ground, and I've been pretty much insisted on doing that myself.
yeah. Because and everything looked great. I watching the clip. It was perfect driving. You just went around the little group of kids, and he made it to the other side. So I love that. Man, and I'm sure they were like, okay, if anyone's going to be at fault, it's the director. So I understand that completely. But it looked great. Everything worked out really well.
Thank you. I don't know if you're curious about it, but the sprayer was actually in the back of that truck. I had a 50-gallon drum of water. I had to figure out how to make all this stuff work. I had a generator and I had a pressure washer. So I tied the pressure washer down low so you couldn't really see it. I held the trigger in the on position so that as soon as you started the generator, it would just start spraying and it was piped into the 50-gallon drum with the water. So that's what I was spraying. It was just water, and it happened to be about 95 degrees out that day. It was Florida. And
Oh,
so believe me, the extras didn't mind getting sprayed with water because it was hot.
oh, I didn't know that because I was
Yeah.
curious about it because I wasn't sure if it was just an already, like a some kind of mechanism. Because I was curious because I'm like, what fluid were you spraying out in that truck? But that's
Oh,
really
you thought I really sprayed him with insecticide? Is that what it
no.
was?
I wasn't sure if it was. I
I'm
wasn't too.
kidding.
Well, I wasn't. I knew you wouldn't use insect, but I was curious because I knew it was some kind of like maybe water based. But that was really clever, just using what was it, the power hose or something like that, or
A pressure washer.
pressure washer. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really clever. Because no, I don't think many people would think of it. So that's really cool how you were able to find creative solutions for things without
You
having to
know,
spend like, thousands of dollars on something like that.
when I watch that scene, it's one of a bunch of things that, as a filmmaker, and I'm sure every filmmaker goes through this, there's things you wish you had done differently or set up differently, and that was one of those scenes because I could have added more punch to it, made it funnier by setting it up better. And the way I would have set it up better in hindsight is I should have had a close up of a sign on the side of the truck that said keep clear of spray or
Mhm.
something indicating that it was somewhat toxic and you don't want to be sprayed with it. And I didn't in hindsight, I wish I had done that because I think it would have been funnier having set it up with that. It's still funny. It makes me laugh, but I think it could have been better. And so that just illustrates the importance of setting things up. If you're going to do comedy, comedy's setup is the most important in comedy of all. So,
Yes, that's right. Because I know my recent guest, Steve Barr, and I, we talked about comedy where best way he described it was like it's like, here, step on this rug. Isn't this a great rug? You're gonna love this rug. Just step on it, and then that's the moment you just pull the rug right out of the person, having that set
Right.
up and payoff. But and I like that scene, the scene with in Save the Mosquitoes. It still works really good because from the viewer, uh, unless they knew if it wasn't water, they think, oh my gosh, is he actually spraying insect spray on these people? So I thankfully the joke still paid off well. It still paid off really well in the short film.
Yeah, and I'm not sure everybody knows what some people see now. Mosquito sprayers are very common in Florida. The climate just creates a lot of mosquitoes. So it's not uncommon on many summer nights to see one of those trucks going down the road, and it's quite loud. It's a loud buzzing sound. You can see the mist coming out of it. Um, in hindsight, again, I should have set it up a little bit better for people who may not have been familiar with that concept or the process of a mosquito sprayer. Um, but again, learning opportunity. So,
Yeah, and it still worked. And I live in Kentucky, so I'm like, okay, that's just a sprayer for spraying bugs and mosquitoes. So I definitely got it. So I think it still worked out very well. Uh,
okay.
yeah, just as an audience member, it worked for me as a viewer. It wasn't like, what the heck is this thing? I think I knew like, okay, that's what it is. So it still paid off very well.
All right.
Yeah, so after when you did Save the Mosquitoes, you entered it into into a festival and so talk about the sec now with your second film. I know that is did you have like equal success with your first one, or how was that within the festival circuit with Save the Mosquitoes?
What was the first question? I didn't quite hear it.
Well, the first part of it was how was it doing your second film after having done Pizza as your first film? Then was that enjoyable experience with Save the Mosquitoes when audience members saw that, at the festival circuit when you put it out there for them?
Yeah, I did enter Save the Mosquitoes into a couple different local festivals. And people laughed. I think they thought pizza was funnier. I think the audiences thought pizza was a little bit funnier, but there was definitely some moments in Save the Mosquitoes that they really liked. I think just because it was so goofy. Um, I did win a couple awards. Oh, I should backtrack a little bit. We were under a time deadline to get it into a film festival, I think in 2017 at the Melbourne Independent Filmmakers Festival. I didn't end up entering it, and I kind of made some people mad for this. Zika had just become a thing, and it was apparently making infants or babies have encephalitis and stuff. It was a really bad timing, and it was very hard for me to have mosquitoes as a topic of humor when it was possible that they were causing, health issues with people. So I didn't put it in I waited a year to put it in a film festival. I think we shot it in 2016. I didn't put it in the 2016 festival. I did it in the 2017 festival. But yeah, we did. It also got nominated for best comedy at the Melbourne Festival. It didn't win. The one that did win was vastly funnier than mine. I was glad he won because he did a great job. The other film festival it was entered into was in the next town over, and I got most original film, and I forget what the other award was, but it won two awards for that. So best ensemble or something like that, I think. So
Oh, that's so cool. And that's understandable with Zika, because I do remember that, with the news headlines and TV news report. So that's understandable for, it's kind of like if there's like, and I think that's important too for as a filmmaker, kind of know your audience. So if there's something happening in the news, it's like, should I really put that out there? And sometimes it's timing. I remember, I'm trying to remember. Have you ever seen a movie called Space Camp, a 1980s film starring Leah Thompson, Tate Donovan, and then Steven Spielberg's wife, Kate Capshaw? Do you remember that film?
I do vaguely, and I wasn't it around the time of the Challenger explosion?
Yeah, so that's
Something.
the
Yeah.
yeah, so that was just a horrible, horrible tragedy that happened, uh, in that time, because you had that school teacher, all she wanted to do was be an astronaut. And of course, she got her chance to be an actual space shuttle, and of course, it blew up, which was horrible, horrible. But it was around that time when that happened. Space Camp was coming out, and at the time, it was just timing. It's a great little film. Even John Williams did the musical score for that, and even though Kate Capshaw was one of the main actors, Steven Spielberg wasn't involved, but John Williams, the great music composer John Williams, said the score for it. But and sometimes, it's kind of like, well, we have a deadline, we need to make it. But that was conscientious on your part, realizing, okay, I know people are going to hate me, but I think this is the right thing to do, to have Save the Mosquitoes released a year after uh, the Zika pandemic is gone. So that I think that was really a wise choice he did. It's not convenient, but I thought it was a wise. I understand the decision for that. My
Right
goodness.
on.
And also, I'm trying to think what other things you've done. Also, and also, kind of before we go into your next short films, talk about wordplayer.com. So when you because that's Terry Rossio and Ted Elliott's website, screenwriting website, and they're the writers of Disney's Aladdin, Pirates of the Caribbean, Shrek, not in that particular order, but they wrote those films. So when you were doing pizza, when you were first starting to, when did you come across the wordplayer.com website?
I cannot remember the moment that I found it or how I found it. I wish I could, but I mean that was quite a while ago. Now at the time, I was also working on what I had hoped would become a World War II feature film, and I had optioned the rights to a book to that. Um, and it was in the process of doing research for that, I think that I started going to the web page. I just don't remember specifically to the site. I just don't remember specifically where I found it, but I knew I needed a lot of advice. And I think at that time I was asking questions relative to that project. And then when the project kind of fell by the wayside, I was hooked on the website. So to me, the fact that a professional screenwriter or two that you could have access to them and ask them questions was to me just unheard of, and it still is really in most respects. So, um, I think I availed myself of it quite often, and of course that's where I began speaking to you.
That's
So,
right. That's right. Yeah. So that's how we first met through wordplayer.com, which is wonderful. So thank goodness for that website. And it's fantastic. And I do remember the project you're talking about because I think it was called what, Tuck's Luck? Is that the
yeah,
name of the book? Yeah. And that was a pretty cool title because that was about a person who went through World War One, was it? And somehow he was able to survive like a lot of near death experiences and came out pretty much unscathed or something like that.
yeah. For anybody who might see this who has an interest in, it's actually World War II, or
Oh,
has an interest in kind of that sort of history. Um, the book was called Fly for Your Life, and it was about an actual fighter pilot. He was British, and his primary aircraft of choice was called a Spitfire. And he had a whole series of very unusual, very fortunate events where, in reality, he should have been killed and wasn't. And it seemed like it spared him time and time again. And it was the book was riveting. I couldn't put it down. I read it probably a dozen times before I even decided to see if I could do a film about it. So um, yeah, it was an interesting experience to option the book, to go meet the family of that fighter pilot in England, and I think my wife and I spent roughly $10,000 on that project. I had a director lined up. I had kind of started doing location scouting over there. I mean, I got fairly far in it for a guy who didn't know what he was doing, but that might have been my undoing, I suppose, why it never actually went further. But um, interesting experience. I certainly learned a thing or two.
Yeah, and was this for like were you going to turn it into a feature film and not a short
Yes,
film, but like a full-fledged feature film?
that would have been a full-fledged feature film. That's quite a tongue twister, man.
Full-fledged feature film. Yeah, and I think that's a lot of people don't realize the development process on films where and I've talked about this with other guests on the podcast before, but so it's kind of like you were getting your firsthand experience of like, okay, I want to do this project, but the sometimes the stars don't align in certain respects despite our best efforts. So that's sad though that it fell through. But hopefully there'll be another project will be able to work out where it's like, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, and then also trying to think so that's great. So you're studying or writing this feature film adaptation. And then also you did a little short film which I love the script of it called Kurt Got Hurt, which I thought it was really awesome. So I want to talk about that little short film, Kurt Got Hurt.
Sure. So the genesis of that, when we moved back to Florida from Texas, I was kind of anxious to get back into filmmaking again or see what was going on with the local scene, who was doing it, that kind of thing. My old film partner had moved out of state by that point, so that really wasn't an option. Um, getting together with him. So uh, I, I I saw an ad on Nextdoor.com of somebody looking for stuff relative to a local feature film that was being shot, and I reached out to them and ended up getting in touch with the director and some of the actors in it. And one of them was his name is Michael Wielden, and he's a heck of a guy. He was one of the main characters in that as they were shooting it. Was when I came into it, but so I helped a little bit on set and everything. And but I got friendly with this guy, Michael Wielden. We got to know each other pretty well, and um, started talking about maybe doing our own projects together. And then, as it happened, some people at my new job found out that I like to do films and stuff, and they asked if I could do one with them, and they wanted to try acting and everything. So Michael and I kind of banged out that script for Kirk Got Hurt, and the company I worked for at the time was nice enough to let us use their office space for it. So I cast some of the people that I work with and a couple people from outside of there, and we shot it in a day. We had some challenges on that shoot too, but I think as far as how it looked, it probably looked the most professional with a few bumps here and there. But so ultimately, it's a fun little flick.
Yeah, and that's really cool that you got to film in a day, and that could be pretty stressful. Where it's like if you're on a very tight schedule, it's like, okay, how the heck are we going to do this? What's the best time? Everyone's schedule. And for those who don't know about Kurt Got Hurt, can you describe a little bit of the project and the nature of the story in itself?
Yep. So it's basically about a guy who works at a place that produces. It's called Rhymes Incorporated, and their whole thing is their job is to create rhymes, I guess, in that world. It's silly, but it is what it is. And there's one guy that works there who cannot bear to work there for another day. He cannot stand the rhymes anymore. And so when we started casting it, this one guy, Ephraim, who's a great guy, was my coworker there at the time. He's no longer with the company, but um, it I always knew that the guy would have acting chops. When you do this long enough and you hang out with enough actors and people, you just know when somebody can act. And I knew he was going to be able to do it. And I asked him if he wanted to play the lead in this thing. He said, I could not wait for you to ask me that because I was really excited about it. He said, so yeah, I definitely want to do it. And he, uh, he, he told me that he had a drama teacher when he was a kid, and he said that teacher he still kept in touch with her sometimes. And after this project, he reached out to her and said, "Guess what I did? I finally got my face on film," and she was just overjoyed. I'm sure she's elderly now, but
Oh,
um, that was one little bit of trivia from it. But yeah, so almost none of the people in it had ever acted before, so I knew that was going to be a bit of a challenge. And I had intended on when we showed up in the morning to sort of brief everybody about what to expect, and I never got that opportunity, which irritates me to this day. But what I wanted to tell them was you may have to sit for a while. There's a lot of waiting in filmmaking, with just sitting around doing nothing while the cameras are moved or resetting a shot or whatever it is. But um, I didn't get to brief anybody, so some of them got irritated because they had to wait for a while. They think you all just go in and shoot it and you're done, and it doesn't work like that. So the reason for that was that when we got to the location, didn't realize that there was ambient noise generators in the ceiling, and we
Uh,
could not find a way to turn them off. So I spent the next hour, hour and a half when I should have been already setting up shots to mute these things as much as I could by pulling the covers from the ceiling and stuffing foam up there. And it's it's still created some audio issues for us, but again, it is what it is. We had to go on. The show must go on. We had to shoot it, so we got started late, and that probably irritated people a little bit too. But it was my fault for not scouting the location a little bit better and walking through it just to look for hazards. So I learned again, lesson learned. But that's why you go make sure that there's no airports right next to where you're shooting, where you might have to deal with air traffic all day or train tracks and stuff like that. You got to be
yeah.
conscious of those.
Oh, I get that completely because even with my where I live, I'm like, okay, turn off the heater so that heating fan does not does not muffle up audio. But yeah, but I think like you said, it's a lesson learned where it's like, okay, so the next project I do, if I encounter an issue like that, I'll be able to know exactly what to do, like get the foam and but yeah, and I think that's what happens too, is that if you're working on a project, there's always going to be a curveball thrown at you, whether it's like you said, not enough time to brief the actors for what they need to do. So it can be definitely like overwhelming where it's like, I know what needs to be done. I just don't have the time physically. This is all we've got. So I think people, when I mean people, I mean audience members sometimes don't think of it. They just think it's the luxury of time. But if you don't have that luxury, it's like, okay, we just got to shoot it and hope for the best. So, but I think, but it turned out pretty good. I definitely enjoyed it. So, definitely got
Well,
to give yourself some credit there.
the nice thing about it was at the end of it, some of them come up to me and said, "We had no idea that this much goes into making a film where you have to do it from this angle and that angle, and you have to think in advance of where people's heads are going to be turned and all these other things that you have to be conscious of." And they said, "Now we have a better sense of what to make a TV show or a movie or anything else, just how much work goes into it. This is for just a really short project, and with minimal crew and everything, and you can imagine what it's like on an actual TV show or an actual movie.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a lot of moving parts and it's a lot of work. And I think it's definitely out of ignorance where people think, oh, why didn't they just do that? It's like, it's a lot of work. Try making
well,
a
that's
movie.
what they say. Even the worst film you've ever seen was a ton of work. So unless you've actually done it, I don't think you can really respect what it takes to put a project together that's okay at a minimum.
Yeah, and that's something that I think I try to be forgiving. Like if a movie's not great, I'll try to keep it to myself. Because there's a lot of people that work on these projects or their goal is to make a good film, but if it turns out horribly, so I try to be forgiving in that respect. Just to have understanding the process, just like if you're a chef and you're cooking and unless that guy's really horrible, then don't eat there. But if it's like I see this person's overwhelmed, then they're just doing the best they can. But so I think, so I guess in that spirit, if you had to give advice to a person that were starting on their first short film, what advice would you impart on them if they were starting? It's like say if you had someone that was directing or producing, what advice would you impart to that young filmmaker starting their own first film? What lessons or that you've learned that you impart to them?
All right, well, the first thing I think is you really got to have a story that's worth filming, and it's not the easiest thing to do. Um, I've seen plenty of short films that really just seem to be a series of disconnected shots. Take my first film, for example, when I was a little kid, but you have to really watch movies and see why they do what they do. And so that the first thing I think is I think you need to be a film buff. It helps. Uh, After script, I think you probably want to. I found acting first helpful because you get to see. I think you should be on the front of the camera a good bit before you get behind it at all, so you can see what the choices directors make, why they move the camera, why they set the lights here, um, because you're going to have to deal with those things at some point. And I think you should see that in action first. Of course, you can watch documentaries of filmmaking that will probably get you to the same place as having been an actor, but um, also as an actor, I think if you do some acting, it helps you be conscious of what you're putting your actors through.
Mhm.
Try to be conscious of their comfort level and making sure that they are, you know, there's nothing on set that might interfere with their process because you've gone beyond, maybe you've been there too long or it's too hot. All these things you need to try to think about so your actors can give you the best product, so to speak, whatever they're gonna do. Um, After that, I think it's a good idea to be involved in the editing process in some way, before you direct, so that you can see why shots need to be done the way that they are. That really is helpful. It makes you conscious of needing certain shots to put them together later, and that's helpful. So those are probably the main primary things. Um, Also, don't be a jerk.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Nobody likes
I've
you
I've
know,
worked with yeah, I've worked with jerks and people that I would never work with again. So, and I'm a pretty forgiving, patient guy, but they really put me to my limits. So,
oh man. Can you give an example without naming names? Is there like an instance where it's like, you know what? After being treated this way, I'm not going to do that to my actors. Like a little like snippet.
oh, easily. Yeah, so I was on I was a production assistant on something called Dracula Meets the Ripper,
Mhm.
and when and I was there as a favor to a friend because he knew that he was going to need help as a production assistant. It was a big workload, and he knew that I'd done it before, so he asked me to come help him. So sure, and so we get there on set, and all the actors are there, some of the crew is there, but the director and the I forget if he was the lighting guy or the sound guy or whatever, they were 2 hours late.
Oh,
And then they spent another 2 hours setting everything up. And it was infuriating.
yeah.
People have, especially when people are there to volunteer their time because it's a low budget project or whatever, man, you need to be on time,
Yeah.
you know? And, granted, what happened with me in the speaker things, that was kind of out of my control. I was there on time, that, and I was at fault for not checking everything earlier. So again, part of the learning process. So,
Yeah. And that's not like you're like 15 minutes late or even 5 minutes late, 2 hours. That's oh, and then additional 2 hours for the setup. I can
right.
only imagine that. Oh man. Yeah, so that's a really good point to be on time. And if you are late, it's like, let someone know. But yeah, so that I think those are actually really good lessons there. And, and also being organized is good, like your prep time. So that way if something does happen you're not ready for, it's like, hey, I prepped enough to do this. Do you think that's true
Correct.
as well? Just like
Oh,
the
definitely. Yeah. Absolutely, you got to be prepared. You can't get there and go, okay, let's figure out how to do this. I mean, you should have already planned that out in advance, you know?
Yeah, because I think, and also if something happens where, like the situation that happened with Kurt got hurt, where, you had the generator fans and all that going, creating some noise, it's kind of like, okay, because those are curveballs. And I think, uh, you can't really anticipate everything, but when it does happen, it's like, okay, well, this is how we're gonna do it.
And
Um,
I might add that on that shoot, the only guy that knew how to shut those things off was on an airplane that day,
oh, no.
which he's always there, he's always available. And on that one day, there was just no getting a hold of him. And later somebody was like, "Why don't you just shut off all the breakers?" Yeah, in an office building with people's computers on and everything. I don't think so.
Oh my gosh, no. No, you can't do that. Like it's like it's like,
No.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I
Wow.
could just imagine coming into work the next Monday and people going, You guys shut off the computers. All the stuff is lost and all this. No, no, that would have been a terrible idea. I'd rather deal with the noise.
Yeah, I agree. That's like, no, you can't do that. It's like,
Nope.
man, but that's very true. And also I got to give some honorable mentions too. Like there's another film project that you've been trying to work on for the last couple of years, and it's not a mockumentary or comedy. It's called William. And
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative of the fact you've let me read some of your early drafts and just kind of let me read them because it's a little great story. And I know that you're in the process of trying to get it made. So I hope that you have success with that and in any capacity. So that's a film I've been really looking forward to. So can you talk a little bit about the project a little bit? Just whatever you're able to do without giving too much away, since you are in the process of, trying to get it, everything, trying to get the stars aligned and all that.
Yeah, so the concept of William came to me. I was still an automotive technician at that time, and I worked with a guy who used to tell me some of the craziest stories of things that he said that he saw, um, of a really bizarrely paranormal nature. And I have something of an interest in the paranormal as just part of my general curious nature, but the things he told me were so outlandish that it was very hard to swallow. But then I thought, what if he actually did see these things? What would be the effect on a person like that? And nobody believed him and stuff like that. And that was kind of the genesis of the story. So I started kind of playing with this concept a little bit and ended up with the initial story was a guy in a neighborhood who is telling everybody that he sees all these scary, horrible things and nobody believes him. And then the story evolved beyond that to where, and you're right, I don't want to give too much away, but um, you know, what if I don't know how to talk about this without giving it away, man.
Well, I guess maybe let's say, what if there are really monsters? We'll just say
Yeah,
like,
what if there really are monsters? So
and then you co-developed that with, is it like Paul Van Scott? I believe Paul Van Scott. You helped kind of toss ideas around and whatnot.
yeah, we worked on it together, and I he had worked with me on Save the Mosquitoes. He was the off-camera interviewer, and I knew that he had some pretty good story sense. He's a really smart guy. I like Paul a lot. We still talk all the time, and yeah, so he is actually. We knew the story needed a final punch at the end. We had a really good ending. We were happy with it, but we just felt like it needed something else. And he was the one that came up with that concept. And so I did all the actual writing, but the story is Paul and I together. So
Oh, that's great. And I do recall that ending. Not to give too much away, it works really good. It's kind of like what you call those cliffhanger type
yeah,
scenes, where it's like, oh my gosh, and you kind of have an idea what's gonna happen, but it's like, how is this gonna play out? Yeah,
right.
which is great writing, honestly, for both of your parts, just kind of figuring it out. So yeah, so having read that script, very well done, very well done.
Thank you.
Man, so I'm trying to think what else. Let me check my notes real quick.
And I
Um,
might add that script has won numerous script writing competitions at this point for short scripts.
yes, because yeah, which is fantastic. Because I remember you telling me about it. Because I think when you were still in Florida, I do remember that you were in pre-production on the short film, and then I think that's when you moved to Texas at that point. So
Correct.
because I remember you had like some casting done, you were still scouting
Yeah,
some locations. And then of course when the move changed, it's like, well, making a movie and moving, it's difficult. So it's like, okay, I need to focus on one and not juggle. So it's great though that you're able to use the script still for screenwriting contests and getting the recognition that it deserves, honestly. Because how many contests? What can you name the contest that it's won?
I'd probably need my phone for that. I've
Well,
got all the laurels assembled, but I don't remember specifically. No, there's several.
yeah, which is great. So that's awesome. At least that there's nice recognition to show like, hey, this is a good story, this is a great concept. So now, so which is great because now that you're in the process of trying to get it made, you can say, well, it's won some contests, so I think that's great, just getting the recognition of it being, just a solid concept. So
Yeah.
that's really refreshing.
It's definitely a darker topic than my usual lighthearted fare.
Yeah,
So, but
yeah,
I wanted to take a stab at something different. And to me, it's very much like the old Twilight Zone or Tales from the Dark Side, things like that. So,
yes, which I love, and even Ray Bradbury's it's called the Ray Bradbury Theater. It's a TV
yep,
show just like The Twilight Zone, which
I
I really,
remember.
yeah, because so it's kind of like in that sense of fantasy, science fiction, drama, classic Ray Bradbury. So that's pretty much your project, William. So yeah, so whenever that's done, I can't wait to try it out. And you even did a trailer for it where you did like the concept, like a little teaser trailer, and you provided the voice as kind of like you were quoting lines from William, like again, just for the teaser. So that was really
Right.
cool too. Yeah.
Except I lost that. I had it on my YouTube channel. It was the only copy I had,
Oh.
and I had some issues with my YouTube channel, and so I downloaded everything off that channel and onto a thumb drive, and it said it was all done, and I deleted my channel without checking to make sure that it took, and all that stuff disappeared from my thumb drive. To this day, I
Oh,
have no idea how that happened, but
oh
it
man.
said that it said the transfer was complete, and that was one of the things. And the guy that helped me with it, again, Phil Lister, he didn't keep a copy of it either, so I lost it, man. If you still
Oh,
got a copy of it, I'd love it back.
well, I don't know if I have a copy. I've seen it on Facebook. Maybe I'll just do some scouting on Facebook.
Yeah,
Wow, that is sad though, because that was a nice little teaser. It didn't reveal too much, but it kind of
right.
gave you enough interest of like, okay, what's happening here?
Yeah,
And yeah, but that's
it
so
was
sad.
pretty cool, I must admit.
Yeah, and he did some great voice acting there, just kind of like at one point you're shouting like, "Leave me alone," and just
Yeah,
which was yeah, so that's sad though. If I ever do come across it, I'll send it your way immediately
well, I'd appreciate that.
because there's nothing worse than working on something that looks great and is like and it's just gone. It's the worst feeling ever. Uh,
Yep, back up, back up, back up. And that's the hard lesson there.
yes, always have backups. And also, I'm just looking at the time, so I don't want to take too much longer. But so I guess if I wanted to see. Who are your favorite filmmakers? Like you mentioned Steven Spielberg earlier with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, just being so inspired by that film. Has there been any other filmmakers that or that films that you've watched that have really inspired you, whether you were young as a kid or as an adult? And it doesn't have to be anyone. It doesn't have to be a long list. It can just be whatever first comes to mind. And then also, I think you also were pen pals with a director named Hugh Wilson. I believe that I remember you telling me about that, and he would impart like, just stories about working on films and whatnot.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we were pen pals. I had a long conversation with you. I'll get to that in a second, but my favorite director is just James Cameron because I adore his attention to detail. And I don't know if you've ever read one of his scripts before, but
Oh, yes,
his
everyone.
scripts are so beautifully written. Um, man, I wish I had a tenth of the guy's talent as a writer alone, much less a director, but I'll I'll never be that good. But I mean, yeah, I've loved all of his work, everything James Cameron's ever done. The amount of detail he puts into everything is just jaw-dropping. I know that I'm sure we've all heard stories of him being a bear to work for, and a real slave driver. But it the final product just shows how incredible of a director he is. So, and as far as Hugh Wilson, he directed quite a few good films actually, but one of them was uh now I'm having a mental block.
One's called Guarding Tess with Nicholas.
Guarding Test, that's the film, yeah.
Yeah,
And
one of
I had reached out to him because I wanted to tell him that the voiceover work, the short brief voiceover work he did in it was my favorite bit of voiceover for anything ever because it was hilarious and it came across as so authentic. And I got the opportunity to tell him that it was awesome, and that led to a fairly long conversation about the stuff that he had done. And at that point, what I didn't know was he was dying from cancer.
Oh,
And yeah, he passed away just a few weeks after our conversation. So the guy
oh my God.
probably, in a great deal of discomfort, I'm sure, at the end of his life, took the time out to talk to a nobody like me and just carry on a nice long conversation with me. And I'll never forget it.
Wow, that's right. Because I do remember, um, when the news came out of his death, and he actually directed quite a few good films.
Yeah.
Guarding Test is what it's called, with Nicolas Cage and Shirley MacLaine. It's on streaming and rental, so go check that film out.
Yep.
But that's really great on his part because despite him being in that level of pain, he was just very generous of just talking about the work. And I think, and also the voice work, I think you're alluding to what he did. Did he voice the president in that film?
Yes.
One of the,
Yes.
yes.
And he told me that the producers didn't want him to do it. They wanted him to hire another actor to do the voice work. He said, "No, I know exactly what this needs to sound like, and I'm the only guy that can do it." And they gave in and they let him do it, and it is hysterical.
Yeah, because for those who don't know the plot of that film, it's basically Nicolas Cage is part of the Secret Service, and he is assigned by the current president to watch over the widow of the late president, played by so it's the president's wife, played by Shirley MacLaine, and she's just a
Yep.
very stubborn, she likes to cause what we call just a stick in the mud, and Nicolas Cage just wants to leave and find more important work. But so the president is kind of like goes on this. The current president is like, I forget the exact lines, but it's on YouTube. Check it out. It's kind of like, well, you're gonna watch this lady because she's a national treasure. You can't or
Yep.
something like that.
She
And
won't let him go, so she's torturing him.
yeah, he's just torturing him. Like, it's kind of like I'm not finished yet. And it's like, I'm sorry. So yeah, and I didn't realize that Hugh Wilson did the president until I saw the credits, and then I remember you telling me about that
Yeah.
brilliant work that he did. So that's great. Um, any other filmmakers come to mind? We mentioned Steven Spielberg, James Cameron, and Hugh Wilson. Any others come to mind? Whether it's
Well,
writing,
I sure love everything James Gunn has done recently.
yeah,
Um, yeah, he's a really good director too, man. I'm an old guy, so I appreciate all the old music he puts in his films.
yes, like the Guardian of the Galaxy films, and even
Exactly.
yeah, and also what he did for the Suicide Squad sequel was actually pretty good too, just using some music. And I'm trying to think of another film, because I know you're also a big Robert Zemeckis fan who did the Back to the Future films.
Yep. Oh yeah, he's awesome. Smart guy.
Very smart. And also, what about writers? I know we're both fans of William Goldman, who wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He also did All the President's Men, Princess Bride. Because I remember at one point he talked about loving his style of writing, which he's a great writer. So he was a really great writer.
I think he also wrote The Great Waldo Pepper. I don't know if you've ever seen that before, but that's an amazing movie.
Yeah. Yeah, he also wrote a movie called The Ghost in the Darkness, based on a true story of these man-eating lions who are obstructing a railroad in progress in Africa. It's
Is
like,
that Val Kilmer?
yeah, Val Kilmer. It's
Yeah,
pretty much that film is Jaws meets Lawrence of Arabia, the sense of,
yeah.
yeah. So he wrote some great ones too. So I know. What about any other screenwriters? Was there like James Cameron's a great writer. I read a lot of his scripts, even the scriptment he did for the Spider-Man film that never got made. I remember reading that. But what
I
about
like I like Quentin Tarantino scripts. I've enjoyed reading those. Um, he's an incredible writer. He's a terrible speller. Don't tell him I said that.
Oh no.
Um,
So Quentin Tarantino, if you're watching, we do apologize.
yeah, a lot of typos, but I think nobody wants to get in there and correct them, so they just leave it the way it is. Um, But
Yeah.
but they're very enjoyable. You know, you can feel the tension in those long dialogue scenes that he loves to do and everything. And I definitely, I don't think I could write dialogue scenes as long as he does. He pulls it off because he's going to direct them, and you know, he makes it work. I don't think I could do that. I'm not a dialogue heavy guy. I tend to keep it very light. For one thing, I like to keep it light so the actors don't have a ton to remember, because
Yeah.
that can create a lot more work on set. But
Right.
yeah, he's a great director and a great writer, man.
Absolutely. And also with on topic of dialogue, it's very true because it's good, short lines are great for dialogue, but if you are going to do a monologue, there is a musicality to it. I think the the newbie screenwriter may be like, oh, just write it, but it's a performance. So even if you think of if we're on the topic of monologues, there's some great monologues. We think the first one that comes to mind is Quint's monologue from Jaws, Steven Spielberg's Jaws, when he's talking about what happened on the Indianapolis when
Oh
that
yeah,
and of course surviving these sharks that are just attacking the water and there's like how many people like was it like I forget the number but it was and that's a great example of because it pays off later when Quint himself is eaten by the great white shark, so it's kind of like it was nice, it was also set up and paid off. uh,
yep,
the monologue from Pirates of the Caribbean 1. uh, so I think it's important if you are going to do dialogue heavy scenes for just listeners and viewers out there is pay attention to the musicality of the dialogue. It's like song lyrics where you have, it's like when do you pause? How long can you stretch it? So I think if anyone were to do those types of dialogue, you just have to really pay attention to the character's voice, how they speak. But if you're not uncomfortable with that, like Greg said earlier, just do the best you can. And sometimes short is better. Sometimes it's kind of like just say it in one line, and that works perfectly well too.
yep.
All right. And now, and aside from William, so any other projects you've been working on, or just kind of just trying to get William just into, the pre-production of that?
I do have another script I've been playing with, which is another parody. And I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show. It's Chip and Joanna Gaines, where they go out and they rebuild houses and things like that. Fixer
Yes.
Upper.
Yes, like the
Yeah, so
extreme makeover. Yeah, like the extreme
it's
makeover.
it's yeah, it's like that. It's a parody of those two, except I'm kind of hoping if I ever get it finished, that I'll send it to them and maybe they'll produce it with them starring in it. I think they've both got a sense of humor, and I think they'll bite. I just got to finish it, and we've been so busy with the house, it's been hard to
Yeah. Yeah, it's
hard
kind
to
of like right, exactly. It's kind of like, well, let's focus on the real house we're trying to, because you've
yeah,
been
exactly. Uh,
yeah. And then also I know that you and I briefly we worked on a Star Wars parody called Rise of the Lightsaber, Your Concept. So that was cool to do that briefly, just work on.
you and I will get back to that at some point. I'm not letting that one go because it's really funny. So
Oh, good, because once you told me the basic, I was like, as you can see, I'm a Star Wars nerd, so I was like, okay, let's yeah, so hopefully one day we'll get that little Star Wars fan parody off the ground. So that would be awesome.
we'll get to it, brother.
Yeah, well, again, any closing thoughts, Greg, before we sign off or anything like that?
No, man, I appreciate your friendship and all the chats we've had over the years, and I do hope that we do get to work on a project together someday, man.
Oh, me too. I'm looking forward to that. So again, thank you so much, Greg, for being on the podcast. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Take care.
Thank you so much for watching my conversation with special guest Greg St. Pierre. If you have enjoyed this episode of Reed's Conversations, be sure to click the like button and subscribe button on my YouTube channel. That way you will be notified for future upcoming episodes. To learn more about screenwriting, visit Terry Razio's website, www.wordplayer.com.